set list of things to discuss, which is here. So first I'm going to talk a bit more about myself, though I probably don't need to say that much now that I've finished. Why I joined the program and where it is that I see myself in the, well, it's kind of funny to say short term and long term because when you deal with anything that's like the PhD program, there is nothing that's short term. Then I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about what exactly is the program and what's been my experience with the program and any advice that I have to people that actually are interested in joining me in the PhD. And of course, questions. So about me, I actually grew up in Quebec. I lived here for 15 years and used to go to private schools in French and Canada. Then I moved to Southern California where I went to public high schools and experienced quite a bit of culture shock. So I guess this would be probably my first experience being a hybrid. You don't have state up in the US, so I ended up going straight to university from high school and ended up doing bachelor's in biological sciences. And like everybody other than wants to go to biological sciences, I ended up wanting to go to med school. So I joined the MD PhD program in Yale in 2005. I did BOM and I'm hoping to graduate this year. So why did I become an MD PhD? And I'm probably a bit unusual in, as a future MD, like in the crowd of MDs that have preceded me, because I actually nearly didn't go to med school. Doing my undergrad, I became pretty disillusioned with the way that things were done in medicine in the US. And the more courses that I took, the more years that I spent as an undergrad doing biological sciences, the more I spoke with my professors about what it is that made them do research, the more it was that I found that kind of environment to be particularly stimulating, the more I found research to be interesting. The perspective that you have on things when you're doing research is completely different from the one that you have from when you're doing medicine. The kinds of problems that you're approaching research are completely different. The mentality is different. The atmosphere is different. And I did a lot of research and I did a lot of teamwork and I really enjoyed my time in academia and I really wanted to stay in there. However, most of my talk is actually going to be focused on why it is that I do research. That doesn't say that I don't think that medicine value-wise I don't enjoy medicine. I'm just going to mostly focus on that for the purpose of today's talk. But basically, I'm going to use a lot of anecdotes tonight. To start with this one, I mean, there was, I used to do research in the lab that did work on Stethoscope, and it was pretty interesting stuff on how genes were regulated and that kind of thing. And my boss ended up submitting, my boss at the time submitted a grant, and it was a very good grant, and they didn't really have much to say about it. They really ended up saying as a critique, interesting, but esoteric. So what you're doing is interesting, but not really useful to anybody. And so when I was debating what it is that I wanted to do, especially since I wasn't sure if I wanted to do research or medicine or both, that really kind of that particular event really opened my eyes to the fact that basic science and a lot of basic science research is kind of an ivory tower. It's very isolated from everything else, and it's often disconnected from reality and from really the pragmatic needs that are found in the clinic. And from my end, what I liked about medicine was that really what you do is relevant, and what you can really see the result in front of you. So the kind of work that I wanted to do was more translational. It was more in between where I can do work, not necessarily on patients, but work that would eventually actually be helpful to patients. Something that was a bit more pertinent. Not to say that software work is a bad thing, because there was no Nobel Prize given to a guy at Tech for it very recently. But I mean, I wanted to do something that was a bit more patient disease oriented, directed. I had a bit of, having to actually go over to see my professor after was a bit awkward. And I was a bit surprised by Dr. Rose because he actually really openly bashed MDs throughout his entire lectures on evolutionary biology because this work is having to do with the clinics. And he actually ended up surprising me by telling me, good for you. And he told me that I wouldn't be able to do medicine without a PhD. And to me, that it resonated pretty strongly with how I felt at the time and how I still feel right now that I would be able to do both. One without the other. So before I start talking a bit more about the program and my trip through the program, my not so short-term goals and my really long-term goals basically have to do with for the next decade or so, I'm hoping to graduate with really short-term. And this is really important, and it's going to make a bit more sense why this is really important later on, because I really want to get this done before I go back to med school. After that, my hope is to actually be able to do a residency in internal medicine, which is the side of medicine is actually a bit more about problem solving, a bit less routine, at least from my perspective. And hoping to be able to find a place where we could be able to actually have a good balance between like a good program for internal medicine and a good program that has like decent opportunities for research. And that's the thing with research. That's one of the big challenges that comes with being a PhD is that when you do research, does anybody here read PhD comics? Yeah. Does anybody see like the things like you start as undergrad, you know a whole lot about, you know a little about a whole lot, but then when you do like your PhD, you know a whole lot about very little. Well, that's the thing. When you do your PhD, everything becomes very, very focused, and you don't want to continue like doing future research on exactly what you did the PhD, but you can't really always do something completely different. So finding things that are somewhat related to what you're doing, but not exactly what you're doing, at the same time trying to find something to do for medicine, it's not quite so easy. Very far from me, what I would like to do is actually find a way to practice medicine and do research. And as you'll see later on, it's complicated. But it's what I'm hoping to do eventually. So enough about me, about the program. But before I talk exactly about the program, I went to the Canadian Society of Clinical Investigation recently, and there was a talk given by Dr. Robert Lee, and he had I pretty much stole this from his slides, I thought it was pretty funny, but also very pertinent. I don't know how many people here actually have done like undergraduate research or anticipate doing graduate research, but I strongly encourage you to, only to find out whether or not it's right for you, because there's really no other way to know whether or not it's right for you unless you actually at least try for a semester or two. And well, his top, so that's kind of his top 10 lesson. Like at the top is, well, he didn't really want to go to law school, so that kind of narrows that down. But from there, it's like, the way I see it is, it's more as a set of questions where it's like, do you have an off-peak sense of humor that will help you handle the hardships of research? And the thing with research is that you have a lot of peaks, very high peaks, and when things work, it's very powerful, it's very exciting. But you also have some pretty deep valleys, and you really need to have at least something to help carry you through between those peaks. Do you have an eye for incongruity? Do you see things stick out when they stick out? Do you notice little differences? And when you see those little differences, do you see more questions than you see answers? When you get those answers, are you more skeptical than others about the answers that you see? Iconoclasm. Do you enjoy breaking down established dogma? Do you have problems with authority? Are you curious? Are you independently wealthy? Which actually is funny, but very pertinent, because as was mentioned a couple of times until now, especially with all the MBA stuff, you don't make much money doing research. I mean, any time that you will end up spending as a scientist away from the clinic will be a pay cut. So that's kind of a plus side from doing MD, but then it also creates a bit of a conflict as to how you're balancing them amongst many conflicts. And finally, how little sleep can you survive on? Because basically, when you're doing the MD, you're doing like your PhD, and these are each full-time jobs. In fact, I mean, you can look at a lot of people, I mean, these are overwhelming jobs for a lot of people. You're trying to do both simultaneously, so it's a bit of a balancing act. But the thing is, really, how is it different to do an MD PhD? So what? Because, I mean, I've had people challenge me that I knew for a long time. They're like, well, why are you even bothering to do a PhD? You could be an MD, you could write your grant, you could be doing research right away. You don't need to bother, like, spending an extra 4 years of your life slaving away in the labs being paid very little. And the fact of the matter is, at least to answer that question, I mean, you don't necessarily have the same kind of training when you're an MD than when you have a PhD. The way that you approach problems, the way that you will be able to formulate hypotheses, the way you'll be able to understand the nature of the experiments you're going to be doing. Your role in the lab, if you do this, and I've seen people do this, will be very different than someone who actually has a PhD or someone who does both. If you actually are only doing the MD, then odds are, from what I was able to see, the way you're running your lab is not necessarily yourself, but through a group of different research associates. And these are people with PhDs who essentially don't necessarily have their own lab, but practically have it through you. You guide, as an MD, more the direction of where you're going, but really they're the people handling the minutiae of how things actually are running around. But why would I bother doing research if I was just why would I bother with the MD if I wanted to do research? Which is something a bit of a pertinent question to me, since I personally lean more towards the research end. And the reason for that, I'll use another anecdote. Recently we had a meeting with the Dean of Medicine, and one of the directors, Katie and I,